Welcome to Violet Crush Month 4. I've done some pre-sewing here so that it doesn't take so long for you to see what we're working on. I like to keep the printed copy of what the finished block looks like in front of me as I work on my instructions. So to start with today, we're going to work on making our half square triangle sections. So let's pull our fabrics, make sure everything is labeled so that you don't forget what you have. And I will try to not reach in front of the camera any more than I have to. This is all still very new to me. So we're going to pull a fabric D and O. And I'm going to go ahead and pull one of each of the units so that we can just chain sew and it makes it easier for you. So this will be known as Unit 1A. We'll go ahead and label that. It won't interfere with our sewing. Unit 1B is D and F. Put those together. Put another label. This will be Unit 1B. Unit 1C is D and E. And Unit 1D is M and A. Let's get our sandpaper board out here. So we'll mark all these with our white chalk pen. I'm only doing one diagonal line. You can do the diagonal line and then mark a 1/4 inch on each side. But if you're making sure that you have a good 1/4 inch seam, you can just put your presser foot by that line and you don't need to do extra marking. Today would probably be a good day for you to check your bobbin and put in a new needle. Remember, we're using a size 70 needle for the batiks. It does work better. Batiks are very tightly woven because they've been washed and washed and washed. It makes your sewing a lot easier. Make sure you have everything lined up nice and neat. That away, we're going to start sewing. The stiletto is very helpful with lifting your fabrics up off this board. I generally just sew, unless it's a very small piece, I use a 2.5 stitch length. And if I was concerned about my 1/4 inch, I would switch my needle position one position to the right Makes a little bit more of a scant quarter, but I have found for this pattern I don't need to do that. We'll stitch down one side of all of them. I'm going to take these out, turn them around, and stitch the other direction and watch all my little papers fall off. Get this out of my way. So now I'm going to pick up all my papers. Clip these apart. This one is still 1D. This is 1C. One B, 1A. Let's set our seams. Now we're going to cut these apart. And I really do try to stay out of the screen so you can see. We're cutting on the drawn line. Stack them to the side. Trying to cut them in order. When cutting on top of a wool mat, you have to press a lot harder than normal. Last one. This is one of the easiest of the 8 months of blocks. Okay, now we're going to go press each one open. As you can see, I already have completed some units so that when we get ready to put it together, you can see everything. Let's clip a little bit. Put your dark fabric on top, just barely lift and let the iron do the movement. Put these aside, as we will be using them again in just a couple of minutes. We're going to be making what I call hourglass blocks. And I want you to be especially careful sewing them together so that you don't lose your points in the center. Okay, now we're going to go to our next step. Follow your instructions. They do seem a little odd, but they work. I've already tested it twice. We're going to take a unit 1A and a unit 1B. If you take them off the bottom, then you're less likely to lose your labels. And it will show you here, your dark fabric is going to go against the light fabric. And as you do that, you can move those seams until you can feel them lock together. So we're going to go ahead and mark this. On the back side. And I'm going to sew them one at a time. Just less confusing that way. Be sure everything is lined up. And that you can feel that those two seams are locked in. Just as we did before, we're going to sew down one side. I want to kind of open it up and look to make sure that everything feels like I want it to. Flip it around. Be sure to get that thread back under the presser foot. And believe it or not, I have just about used all of the little pieces that I cut off my squares from blocks 1 and 2. Okay. This we're going to set aside. We're going to go to our next one, which is a 1A and a 1C. The 1C is fabric D and E. So here's our 1A. By the time you cut these out this time, you should be very familiar with what your colors are. We got a 1C, light to dark, dark to light. Match your seams. Get everything nice and even. Mark it. We're going to sew. Check your seams again. You can pick one up and just kind of slide it across, and you can feel it lock in. Put this one aside. We're doing them as it's shown in the picture so that we're still staying in the same order. Now we want to do a unit 1D to a unit 1D. Same thing, dark to light, light to dark. And if they look pretty close to the same, just opposites. And I really like to mark mine so that I can sew with this part of the seam going up. That helps it lock in better as you're sewing. The machine just kind of pushes it along. Let's mark this one. Then we'll cut and press, and we'll have a block ready to assemble. This one is much faster. You need 4 blocks. I'm going to move this out of our way. If you're a pinner, you can pin these together. I don't pin unless it's absolutely necessary, or there are points so critical that they have to be pinned together to join. Okay, now we're going to set our seams on each one. And cut apart. And when you hide your rotary cutter from yourself, that's not a good day. Okay, before we go to the next one, I want to open this up and just show you what we've done. Now, before you get ready to press, we're going to go back to what we did the other day on one of the other blocks. Pull this seam down, that seam up, pop that open, make a 4-patch, press around, make all your seams flat, and then you will have a flat block. Let's go ahead and cut our others. And I'm going to show you how I trimmed one, but I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me trim all of them because I went ahead and trimmed some blocks ahead of time. Trimming does take a while. This is what this one looks like. You can see our points in the center are right on where they need to be. Trim one more. Move this out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and open this one up. Pop it open. Take your iron and work around those seams. Make sure that they go in the right direction. Then hold it for a second to make it flat. All of these that we've just done get trimmed to 4.5 inches. Now, I have a little tool that I find very handy. If you don't have one, you can use this ruler and line up on one of the diagonal lines and get it to 4.5. This is known as a fussy cut ruler, and I know you can't see it real well. Let me put something behind it. It has diagonal lines both directions and shows you your 1/4 inch. So I can put this on this piece, and I do have handy grip tape on the back so that it doesn't move. You can trim it all at one time. And who doesn't like to trim all at one time? So I'll trim one just to show you how easy it is with this ruler. And then I'll trim another one the regular way in case you don't have one of these. These are a Quilt in a Day ruler. I'm sure they're still available. I've had mine several years. I became an Eleanor Burns certified instructor so that I could teach her ways. And there we go. Now let's trim one using the other way. You press one open. To do it with the regular ruler, you're going to line up your diagonal along either side. It doesn't really matter, but as you're doing it, find your 4.5 inch marks. You want those 4.5 inch marks along these seams so that you don't cut off any of your points. Very important. Not a super easy task, but it can be done. So we'll trim 2 sides. Flip it, line up your 4.5 and your 4.5 and your diagonal. And there we go. 4.5 inches. Okay, let me move all of this out of our way because we have enough units to put together a block. Put these to the side. Let's get our instructions. We need 2 of unit 2A, which is this. Pay attention to where you put your dark pieces. The darks are what's important here. We're going to use 2 of our 4.5 inch squares on each side. 4.5 inch A at the top. We're going to use unit 2C for the center, and that is this one. Dark at the top and the bottom. Unit 2B, which are these. One here, and one here, and another A. Okay, I'm going to flip this and do as we have before. We're just going to chain sew pieces together so we don't have so much stopping and starting. Flip this to here, line everything up, still 1/4 inch seams. Now before I start my next one, I want to clip the first one off. Put it back in place. And then we're going to go to this one. Cut that one off, put it back in place. Now we're ready to take this one, flip it over, line it up, I find this is the best way to do the blocks. That way you can complete the entire block at one time and you don't flip pieces around, get them in the wrong direction. That row's complete. Our second row is now complete. Now we need to get this one. A very interesting block. And there we go. Now, before I continue on, I prefer to press, and I want to look at where the most seams are and determine how to press it. From what I see right now, we need to press these seams in, these out, and these in. That way they will all lock together. So let me try to stay out of in front of the camera and press seams. You can press from the back and then go from the front to make sure that everything is opened up and flat. And put it right back in the correct position. This one, we're going to press out and out. Press out and out. And put it back. This one again goes in and in. And as you start doing these, if you're not real familiar with locking your seams, you will see the purpose for doing that. Okay, let's finish this block. Lock your seams. Line everything up. You can feel when it's all together and flat. Lock this seam. Open it up. Double check your pattern to make sure you've turned everything correct. Now we're going to sew this end. And once again, I like to sew with this part of the seam facing up. So sometimes you kind of have to turn your blocks around. But this is still going to give you the best finish. Match up this seam. Make sure your edges are even. Sometimes you have to lift the presser foot to make sure that a seam doesn't try to flip the wrong direction. And there we have it. We're going to give it another press, set our seams. I'm going to press towards that direction. set our seams and press down. And there you have a completed block 4. You need 4 of these, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.